new series on my, let me rephrase it, one new series on my channel. So here's what you do. So I will be going to 2KU, going to scrimmage, and I'll be going through all these certain teams, and I try and score over 100 points. So now I would like to show you in this video, it's going to be about 10 teams that really done well in the NBA. It'll be classic teams only, okay? So I will always put them up against the Wolves just to show you this. So the first man I'd like to talk about with this team is Gary Payton. So Gary Payton, he was at this time he was still one of the best defenders on this team. But like he could never make it work. But this was his second to last year. So it makes sense why he should have been better. But like that's the thing, like this was his second to last year before he went to Miami to win a championship. And like it's crazy because this team would have won a championship. Next I like to talk about Karl Malone. This was his last year in the NBA, but like he should have done good. I mean, he's Karl Malone. Karl Malone probably is one of the greatest players of all time. He is on one of the top, has the most points, 5th all time with points in the NBA. I think at like 33,000. Next, this man I would like to talk about. This was his prime. This was prime Kobe. This was the year that Shaq left, and this was the year before Shaq took his talents to South Beach, because this was the year after the three-peat. But like because of that Shaq and Kobe arguing, Kobe gave the Lakers the ultimatum where it's either him or Shaq, and that's why Shaq left. Next, I like to talk about the man in the middle. The Diesel, Shaquille O'Neal. Probably the most dominant center on this team. And the only reason why this team was so good was if Kobe or the other team was starting to fall back a little bit, like they were out of rhythm, just throw it into Shaq and he'll just dominate for you. And then then we have Rick Fox, who was in the starting lineup at this time of the year. This was the year. So then you have Rick Fox, who was probably one of their best shooters from three-point, that is. And then look at this bench. You have Horace Grant, who was still good at this time. Then you got Devion George, Byron Russell, the guy who got crossed by Michael Jordan. Then you have Derek Fisher coming into his prime, Luke Walton, and all that. And then these were just here. But like this team should have went far, but didn't. Like Gary Payton's an 83 on this team, and Karl Malone is too. Rick Foss is a 74. Kobe's a 95, and Shaq's a 95. So this team should have done good. So that was number 10. The next team I think should have done good, but never had the ability to do it. In my opinion, if I had to pick, someone who should have done good, was this team. It should. I feel like this Sacramento Kings team fell apart. So let's start off. In my opinion, let's start off with the guards. So you got Mike Bibby, who's probably the best point guard on this team because his passing ability and his ability to make shots when you need him. Like, for example, that three-pointer. Then you have Doug Christie, who's right now, I think this was like his second to last year, but like, he's got the ability to shoot it. And then we have the next guy I'm going to talk about. Let me just first let them. Then the next guy we have on this list is probably the most important shooter on this team, and that's Peja Stojakovic, who was an amazing shooter at this time. I believe he like won a 3-point contest this year. And then I'm going to go to the big man, in which this is where it got really dominant. At the power forward, you have probably this is his first 2K you can play with him, and it's Chris Webber, which probably, to admit, this was Chris Webber's year. This was Chris Webber, the year he shined. And we can't forget about Vlade Divac. This was probably his best year in the league, and it was on this team. This team should have done good. You could play any type of defense with this team and still do good. You could play a 3-2, and it makes sense with Mike Bibby in the middle at the point at the front, like where Chris Dunn is. Then you have Peja and Doug Christie on both ends. And then you got Chris Webber and Vlade Divac down low. And then we can't forget about the bench. And then Webber can shoot the 3 if you need it. Then you can kick it out. That's the thing, like, if you have Peja Stojakovic at the 3-point line wide open, that's your fault. Now let's take a look at the bench. So we're going to bring in some of the bench guys. So you got Bobby Jackson, Scott Poland, Chucky Brown. I actually have never heard of him. What position? Power forward. Then you have Gerald Wallace. I believe that's young rookie Gerald Wallace. And then, like, you could have Doug Christie stay at shooting guard. I'm confused where one guy is, but I guess he wasn't on the team yet. It was Jason Williams. But then you got like Bobby Jackson, who can pull it. He's got good shooting. Then you got Doug Christie, who would probably come off the bench. Gerald Wallace. This is the year, I believe. Yeah, he came into the league this year. Wait. Yeah, this was his first year as a pro. He's got the dunking ability. Chucky Brown. He's got some mid-range game into him. And Scott Poland has mid-range and really just a dominant player down low. So this They went all the way to the conference finals, but still ended up losing against the Lakers. All right, at number 8. Let's see, at number 8. In my opinion, I love this team, but I gotta go with the 2007-2008 Houston Rockets. And here's why. The 2007-2008 Rockets had a great team. They had Bobby Jackson, they had Shane Battier, Louis Scola, and then the two big guys of this team, Tracy McGrady and Yao Ming. The problem they had with this, the team had problems with, was Yao Ming getting hurt. But Yao was great when he played. I mean, Yao Ming had the ability to shoot mid-range, and they had him wide open for mid-range. They would leave him open too, so that's the thing. And then off the bench, they had Dikembe Mutombo, so it added more height. So you had two tall players, Dikembe Mutombo and Yao Ming you got Yao at starting, and you got Mutombo off the bench. Then you had Tracy McGrady, who's the main focus of this team. And then on the bench, you have like Steve Francis, who was probably the main scorer off the bench. And what's weird about this team is they traded Steve Francis to the Magic to acquire McGrady, because Steve Francis, he never passed the ball, so he made him himself good, just because he didn't want to be a teammate. Then you had Yao, who could grab boards. Then you got Shane Battier, who's a great defensive monster and could shoot threes with ease. Then you had Scola, who probably, if you want it, when people focus too much on Yao Ming down low, they would focus on Scola. They wouldn't focus on Scola, so that's what makes him good. And then you got Bobby Jackson, who again, Then you had Bobby Jackson, who had the ability to score, and he was a good teammate to move the ball. And then if you look at the bench, you had Dikembe Mutombo, Carl Landry, Steve Novak. So if you wanted someone who can shoot, get Steve Novak. Then you had Aaron Brooks, then Steve Francis, who wasn't the best shooter. The only thing that made him so good was his dunking ability. But don't forget, he was how old when this was? He was drafted in 1999. How old was he? He was 30 years old. So like, he was a crazy dunker. He had great ball control. The problem was his passing. Then like, he could rebound for a 6'3" guard. Then those are the generic. So yeah, that should have been a good team. The problem was Yao Ming got hurt a lot. Alright, the next team, at number 6, I believe it is. So the next team that should have did good, in my opinion, I think I have to go Okay, I think I know who, because we went by the team earlier. I think is the 2002-2003 Dallas Mavericks, and I accidentally picked the Cavs, but it doesn't matter. Now, the reason why this team didn't do well, in my opinion, was a draft pick. That's the reason why they failed as a team. And it's all because of this man right here, Raef LaFrentz. Because at this point, they had a great year from their 3 J's. Jason Kidd, Jim Jackson, and I forgot the other J. So if they, with Dirk Nowitzki, and they could have sealed it with the icing on the cake. They hit it with their draft slot choice. They chose Raef LaFrentz. So it was the 1999. It was all because of their decision to draft Raef LaFrentz. They did not do well. They had a great all-star, Michael Finley, and they had great shooting from Steve Nash and Nick Van Exel. The only problem with this is Nick Van Exel's a 6'1" guard. He would have been playing point guard, but they decided to put him at the 2 guard. And then they could have started Sean Bradley, but they decided to start Raef LaFrentz with that amazing bench. So let's start off with the team. First, you got Steve Nash, who's the floor general. You needed someone to bring the ball up. You had Steve Nash, and if he was on a rampage and they decided to focus on them, and he pressed Steve Nash, another guy you could get the ball to was Nick Van Exel, who at the time back in 2001, when he played with the Lakers, was the point guard. He was the point guard. They had Kobe at 2 guard. Then at small forward, you got Michael Finley, who was an all-star, by the way. He had a mid-range and a 3-pointer that was super sweet. Then at the forward, you have Dirk Nowitzki. If you needed someone who could make a shot, if your team started to struggle and you needed someone to make some shots, here comes in Dirk. Who had that fadeaway shot, and he was a mean man in the post. And if you needed to, you could put him at center, because he was 7 feet. He was 7 foot tall. But like, if Dirk was good enough to like play, this was, I believe, the year Dirk won his first ever MVP. So if he kept playing like this for the rest of his career, then he would have been a great player, even though alright, now coming in at number 5. Now at number 5, people think this team did do well, but based on what happened to them, this team, the Magic, the 94-95 Orlando Magic. So you may think this team did good. They beat Michael Jordan of all people, but they never won a title together. And what cost them winning a championship like with this team was the Orlando Magic owners. You see, when Shaquille O'Neal asked for a max contract, they gave him less money. So this team would have won the championship once Michael Jordan retired to go play baseball, or when he was in his older days. So they would have won a title if the Magic's owners gave Shaq the money he wanted. And that's simply what cost them a championship. And then don't forget, they had Penny Hardaway, who was at the point probably one of the best point guards in the league. So at this point, you had Penny Hardaway, who was 6'7" for a point guard. So he would have given you a matchup nightmare. He would give matchup nightmares on other point guards, such as, I'm trying to think of a star point guard at the time. Who was a star point guard at the time? He would have gave matchup nightmares for 6'3" point guards. I understand people won't like my next one. I just wanted to talk about that team. But like, you had the most dominant player in his prime, Shaquille O'Neal. This was young prime. Shaq was in definite prime. And don't forget about the shooting of Nick Anderson. He had the brilliant shooting of a shooting guard they needed. This team would have also done good if they had some better backups, but they had 3D, who I believe started in real life. They had 3D in this game coming off the bench, who, by the way, is one of the greatest three-point shooters of all time. The shooting on him would have been helpful because you have Nick Anderson, who can shoot, and you have Dennis Scott, who can shoot threes. Just imagine having that duo shooting threes together. And then, like, if your team struggled a little bit, just throw it into Shaq and he'll dominate. And Shaq was fast at this time. Let me just go check. Shaq's speed. Shaq at this age had 68 speed, so he's faster than usual. Then he had the crazy rebounding. Then, like I said, off the bench you have Dennis Scott. Alright, so I know people won't be happy with this next choice in the top, my list. It's in the top 5. So at number 4, I know people will be mad at this team I put in. The 2007-2008 Celtics. I know, this is the year that won the title. This was one of the years that they won the title. They won against the Lakers in 2008. But here is the reason why this team failed. These guys, this was the year, I believe this was a few years after LeBron and that team made the big 3. With like LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. But here's why it's on this list. They have Rajon Rondo. Back then was one of the best point guards in the league. He didn't have the shooting, but when they needed someone who can get someone the ball, that was who they gave the ball to get someone to get the ball. Then you had Ray Allen shooting, which was crazy at the time. And by the way, let's check that age. He was 33 years old and was still amazing at shooting. Then you have Paul Pierce. And if you wanted to move someone to the, if you move Garnett to the 5 and Pierce at the 4, and then you have someone else, you can have a deadly duo. And then I would like to talk about let me first keep talking about Paul Pierce. He had the skills you needed from a small forward that would have helped a lot of times. And then probably the main man on this team, the big ticket, Kevin Garnett. Here's why he's the best player on this team. he proved how dominant the Celtics were. When there's a foul call and someone shoots it either way, he jumped up and blocked it either way, proving you can't stop this team. And then the center, Lenny Poe, that wasn't really their center. It was Kendrick Perkins, but like he got injured a lot. That's what caused the 2009 Celtics to lose the championship. And back then in 2K9, Garnett was doing windmills in the post. And the thing is, and if you go to the bench, if you look at the bench, you see a lot of good players off the bench. Now let's go look at the bench. You have James Posey, who by the way still had the shooting. Sam Cassell, he didn't really play a lot. Then you got Tony Allen, who's again a great defender. His perimeter D is an A-, and his post D is a C. Then you have PJ Brown. I don't know why he was on this team. Then you got, of course, the White Mamba, Brian Scalabrine, who can shoot if you needed a 3. Then I didn't even know Scott Poland was on this team, and then the Generics. So what you could do is, you can slide Poe down to the... You can slide Garnett to the 5 and then move Scally to the 4. And then you got all good shooting lineup. Besides Rondo, and you can do a 4-out, 4-out, 1-in with Garnett at the 5, who by the way could guard any tall big man. You could have him guarding at the time Andrew Bynum, Pau Gasol, and that's actually who they had Garnett guarding. They had Garnett guarding Pau Gasol of all people. Alright, I know people are going to be mad at that one. Alright, now this team I'm going to select now. It's going to make sense. It's the 1999 to 2000 Raptors. Now there's a reason why. So it's the year, it was Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady. Vince Carter was in his absolute prime. This was the dunk contest year of Vince Carter. You had Muggsy Bogues, who was old, he was getting older at the time. I think this was his last year. But you had absolute prime Vince Carter. He was too dominant at this time. Then you have Tracy McGrady. This was when he was this is when he first came in the league. This was before anyone knew how good he was going to be. Then you have Antonio Davis at center, who, by the way, was an all-star this year. That year, the year of this team. He was an all-star that year. Then you have off the bench. This was when Doug Christie started doing well in the time frame. Then you have off the bench. Yeah, Doug Christie, Kevin Willis, Del Curry, who was the best shooter on this team. You could have started D. Brown, because this was also his prime. Then you had Alvin Williams off the bench, and you could have started him. But I think they started Bogues because he started getting better at shooting. Like, look at that. He has an 83-pointer. And he was great at passing, too. So that was the thing. Because he was smaller, he could pass it well and dribble it well. And he was like a floor general. Now we're in the top 2. Now the top 2. Okay, so one of these does make sense, and one of them doesn't. I don't know what I'm going to choose yet for the number 2 position. I'm looking at some of these teams. Alright, it's this one. The New York Knicks. Back then when Linsanity was a thing. Now, here's why they did it. Here's why this team failed. It's because Melo got hurt. But then Jeremy Lin was saving Knicks fans. In my opinion. Jeremy Lin was saving the Knicks when Melo was hurt. Because this was the year of Linsanity. And I love Carmelo Anthony. I play with him a lot because I've gotten used to him. This was the year of, I believe, the big 3 with LeBron. But think about the team. You have J.R. Smith at the 2, who was in his prime. You have Melo in his prime. You have Jeremy Lin in his prime. You have Amari in his prime. Then you have a great defensive big man in Tyson Chandler. And then off the bench, you had a great defensive shooting guard in Iman Shumpert, who, by the way, was probably one of their best players off the bench. This was, like I said, Linsanity. Then if you look off the bench, you got Steve Novak, who can shoot. Iman Shumpert, who's a great defensive point guard, shooting guard. Then you have Mike Bibby. This was when he retired. Then you got Baron Davis, Tony Douglas, Jared Jeffries, and some other players, I think. But, like, this was the year they should have done well. And if you want to, you could throw Iman Shumpert at the 1, because Iman Shumpert could be a point guard. And finally, the number 1 spot. Now, this one I agree with. This was actually going to be my number 1. I knew it was going to be my number 1. It is the 2007-2008 Denver Nuggets. And yes, I know this team should have did good. You have Allen Iverson, who is still in his prime. You have J.R. Smith coming up to his prime. Then you have Melo in his young full prime. Then you have Kenyon Martin, who's a little bit past his prime, but he was big at the time for this team. Then you have Marcus Camby, who this was like 2 years behind his prime. Like I said. And then you have off the bench like Nene. You had Nene. You had Nene off the bench, which was amazing for that team at the time. And then, like, look at it. Allen Iverson, he's still in his prime. He actually had a better three-pointer than he did back then. Then, here you go. Allen Iverson was still in his prime. He still had the handles. Then you had J.R. Smith, who shot like crazy. And I remember this was the year Carmelo Anthony got hurt by hurt his neck or something when he banged into Kevin Durant. But like, it was crazy though. This team should have did well. Then let's go look at the bench. You had Nene, Stephen Hunter. Literally, those are the only 3 real guys in 90 minutes, like playing the whole game. Alright guys, that is my list. Name teams that you agreed with and name teams you disagreed with. I will see you next time. Bye!